clang of steel, the roar of fire, and the cries of the wounded echoing through stone walls. This was the brutal reality of a medieval siege. Unlike the swift charges of open-field battles, sieges were long, exhausting, and psychologically punishing. They could last for weeks, even months. The goal was simple but devastating in its execution: surround a castle or a fortified town, cut off its supplies, and force it to surrender by starvation, disease, or destruction. For both attacker and defender, life during a siege was filled with tension, violence, and unimaginable hardship. If you were one of the soldiers laying siege to a castle, your life would be spent in the muddy, pestilent camps just beyond bowshot from the walls. You would sleep in tents if you were lucky, or in hastily dug trenches if not. The camps stank of sweat, blood, spoiled food, and human waste. There was little comfort and even less safety. Archers on the castle walls constantly watched for careless movement. A single step too far forward could mean an arrow in the throat, and if the defenders had access to crossbows or mangonels, the odds of dying in a sudden, messy fashion skyrocketed. The daily routine of a besieger was repetitive and grueling. You dug trenches, built siege towers, and pushed battering rams toward the walls. You helped pile rocks and wood for trebuchets, great war machines capable of hurling massive stones or flaming projectiles over the walls. Sometimes you loaded diseased animal carcasses or even human bodies into those machines, hoping to spread plague within the walls. Siege warfare was psychological as much as physical. If you could terrify the enemy into surrendering, it saved everyone the cost of a bloody final assault. But the defenders were just as desperate and just as cunning. If you were inside those castle walls, your world was shrinking with each passing day. Supplies dwindled rapidly. First went the fresh meat and bread, then the dried beans and salted fish. Eventually, you would find yourself eating boiled leather, rats, or grass. Hunger clawed at your insides. The smell of rot seeped into every crevice. Disease began to spread. Dysentery was common, and there was little medicine or clean water to treat it. Still, you fought to hold the walls. Defenders had the advantage of height, strong stone, and the ability to rain down death on the attackers below. You dumped boiling water, hot sand, or burning oil on the men trying to scale the walls. You shot arrows and hurled stones from the battlements. Some castles even had murder holes, gaps in the ceilings, of entry passages through which defenders dropped deadly surprises on anyone who dared breach the outer gate. Night offered no respite. Sleep came in fits and starts, always interrupted by the shrill warning of a surprise assault or a fire in some part of the fortification. If you were a soldier, you kept your sword within arm's reach and slept in your armor, if you had any. If you were a civilian hiding behind the walls, you cowered in dark corners, holding your children close, praying you would live to see the next sunrise. Every creak of wood or distant shout felt like doom approaching. The longer the siege lasted, the more unhinged things became. Both sides began to lose their grip on civility. For the attackers, frustration mounted as the defenders continued to hold out. Soldiers grew impatient, discipline faltered. Brawls broke out, supplies were stolen. Diseases swept through the crowded camps. The sight of your comrades being picked off by arrows or smashed under falling rocks wore you down. Morale cracked. Yet the thought of riches, revenge, or simply survival pushed you forward. Inside the castle, things often got worse. The local lord might impose brutal discipline to keep control. Rations were tightly controlled. Desertion was punishable by death. Tensions among the townspeople and garrison boiled over. Accusations of hoarding, cowardice, or treason could lead to public hangings. Priests led daily prayers, calling for divine intervention, while healers tried in vain to treat festering wounds and feverish children. And then came the final assault. If the attackers decided they could wait no longer, they would storm the walls in a coordinated push. Siege towers were rolled into position, ladders were thrown against the stone, the air filled with the deafening sound of war cries and weapons striking shields. If you were on the front line, you had one job: kill or be killed. The violence of a final assault was beyond comprehension. Men were crushed by rocks, impaled by spears, or set on fire as they climbed the walls. The fighting was hand to hand, face to face. You could smell the breath of the man trying to kill you. You heard the last gurgling sounds of the dying. There was no mercy. If the attackers broke through, the defenders had one of two choices: retreat to the keep for a last stand, or surrender and pray for mercy. Often, no mercy came. Victory in a siege was a grim affair. If the castle had resisted for too long, the attackers often sacked it as punishment. Soldiers looted treasure, food, and sometimes people. Fires were set, homes were ransacked, and women and children were not always spared from the horrors of conquest. Even those who survived were left with nothing but rubble and ashes. From the perspective of a commander, a siege was a colossal test of patience and logistics. You had to keep your army fed, organized, and motivated in conditions that bordered on hellish. You dealt with mutiny, disease, bad weather, and enemy counterattacks. Every decision carried massive consequences. Move too fast and you might lose half your men. Wait too long and your own supplies would run dry. One misjudgment could mean total failure and disgrace. For the civilians trapped in the middle, a siege was something you remembered for the rest of your life. If you survived, you carried the trauma in your bones. You remembered the taste of hunger, the smell of blood, and the sound of the enemy crashing through your gates. Children who lived through sieges grew up faster than they should have. They learned early that the world was cruel, and survival often came at a steep moral cost. Despite all of this, people continued to build castles and continue wars. The siege became one of the most defining military strategies of the medieval world. Castles were both symbols of power and invitations for attack. Every noble wanted one. Every king wanted to take one. And so, the cycle of siege and counter-siege went on for centuries. What made sieges so unique was their psychological impact. Unlike a quick battle, a siege forced everyone involved into a long, slow unraveling. You watched your friends die one by one. You lived with fear every moment of the day. You had to make decisions no one should have to make. Do you open the gates and beg for your life, knowing what awaits? Or do you hold the line, even as the food runs out and the flames rise? In the end, to fight in a medieval siege was to face the darkest corners of human endurance. It was not glorious. It was not clean. It was not even always honorable. It was survival wrapped in stone and fire. And whether you stood atop the battlements or beneath them, you would never be the same again. Thanks for joining us on this brutal journey into the heart of medieval siege warfare. As you've seen, fighting in a siege was not about flashy armor or heroic duels. It was about hunger, fear, exhaustion, and surviving one more day surrounded by death and desperation. Whether you were a soldier swinging a sword, a builder hauling timber for siege towers, or a terrified civilian huddled behind crumbling walls, the experience was harrowing. No one escaped unchanged. These were battles of will as much as strength. Weeks of tension built into moments of chaos, where decisions were made in blood and fire. Siege warfare tested every ounce of courage a person had. And long after the walls had fallen or the attackers had been driven back, the scars remained etched not just in stone, but in the minds of all who lived through it. If this glimpse into the raw, unforgiving world of medieval sieges left you thinking, imagining, or even feeling a bit more thankful for your current walls and roof, then we did our job. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss another journey into the gritty side of history. Until next time, stay curious.